We all know the Canadian wilderness has a diverse amount of wild animals, majestic creatures where some can't be found anywhere else on this planet. Most of Canada's wilderness has remained untouched since the beginning of North America. But does it have its own secrets we don't understand? Creatures that aren't supposed to exist, yet people are encountering and reporting to us. On this episode of Canada's Great Unknown, we take a look at some of the strange encounters with legends in our forests. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy these allegedly true stories of cryptids from areas you may know. If you have a story that you would like to share with us, email us at canadasgreatunknown@gmail.com. We'd also really appreciate you following us on Twitter at CGU Stories, on Instagram and TikTok at Canada's Great Unknown. Also, if you could, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell right here on YouTube so you can follow along every time we post new content to Canada's Great Unknown. Don't forget to leave a comment below these stories and let us know what you think or stories you'd like to hear about. Up here in northern British Columbia, where I live, there's not much to do besides work and play. Every day is quite similar, to the point of monotony. But I like it up here, and that's why I've lived here for the last 15 years. My name is Gavin, and I was originally from Calgary, but as the city kept getting bigger, I knew that it wasn't home to me anymore. I wanted to get out, into a quiet area where I could live, enjoy my outdoor hobbies like camping, as well as having a decent paying job to support me, and if I ever decided to start a family. So when I packed up for Fort St. John, I knew it would be a little bit of a culture shock. The job was pretty much the same as I worked in a lumber mill in Calgary, before taking the same position at a mill up north. What I found out about the people in the town was a nice change of pace. Good, honest, hard-working people who kept to themselves. Although everyone was nice, it was tough to make friends, which I didn't mind, as it allowed me to spend some quality time on my own, investigating the nature and the surroundings of my new home. On the weekends, I would take my Jeep Wrangler up the mountains following the logging roads up to some incredible views. Had to be careful, though, as the grizzlies and black bears really didn't like people in their territory. It's so common to see wildlife up here that it becomes synonymous with breathing. On weekends, I'd grab myself some dinner and a case of beer, roll a couple of joints, and go up to the mountain paths to see both the sparkling view of the lights of the city below and the hundreds of thousands of stars up above. But on this particular night, I saw something that, really, I don't think it should exist. But there it was, standing right before my eyes. It was in August, and I just found out via a text message that my girlfriend from back home wasn't coming up for the weekend. In fact, she stated that in that text message, she wasn't ever coming back up here, and that we were through. 5 years together, and all I'm worth is a bloody text message to say it was over. Feeling depressed, I decided to grab a bottle of rye from the liquor store and head up the mountain to allow my thoughts and my anger to flow in the abundance of nature so I didn't have to give a care anymore. Took me about 25 minutes to get up to my mountain spot. It was still dusk, so I made myself a little fire, even though there was a fire ban on, grabbed my lawn chair, and set it out in front, with both the fire and the view in front of me. I then walked back to my Jeep to grab my binoculars to look down at the city and up into the stars. Everything was normal for the first couple of hours as darkness started to set in. The crickets and the frogs were singing away in their natural tone. I could hear an owl in the distance, which really relaxed my nerves. I lit a joint 'cause I figured if I got too stoned or drunk, I would just sleep in my Jeep and drive back in the morning. It was just before 11 o'clock, and even though I had a good buzz going on at this time, I was still cognizant to notice that, all of a sudden, there was silence all around me. I started looking around, and the frogs and crickets were silent. I slowly stood up from my lawn chair and started looking around. But it was just me and the light from the fire. I started to get an uneasy feeling, so I slowly started backing up to where my Jeep was parked so I could turn the headlights on to see a little more of what might be going on. This is when I started hearing some rustling in the bushes about 50 feet to my left. Within seconds, I was at the driver's door of my Jeep, and I hopped in and locked the doors, as I thought there was probably a bear coming through the bushes at this time. The brush and branches in the bushes started moving, but not down low to the ground, more at around the 6 to 7 feet off the ground level. When I put my high beams on, everything stopped. But in between the branches, I could see the glow of what looked to be red eyes staring back at me. I thought to myself, what the hell is this? Whatever it was started to move forward, and that's where I saw what looked to be a paw coming out of the bush. I thought to myself, this bear is walking upright. I then saw the shoulder. Then my jaw dropped when the head and face came into light. This thing, it looked like a dog, walking on 2 legs. I screamed and started to shake as I quickly reached down and nervously fumbled around to start my Jeep. It took 2 steps out of the bush towards my vehicle. This dog-like creature was baring its teeth at me. It was standing about 7 feet tall. Its upper body was covered in hair, and it looked like it had hands of a human, and its 2 legs looked like a dog's would. I could see its chest breathing in and out heavily as it looked to be taking deep breaths. I finally got my Jeep started, and I honked my horn at it, which seemed to startle it, and it took a step back. I threw my Jeep into drive, turned my steering wheel sharp, and got the hell out of there. As I started to pull away, I could see it starting to chase my vehicle as it went down on all fours and started running. I sped up, going down the hill, trying to create some space between me and this thing. I quickly made a sharp turn on the logging road, going down, and never saw that creature after that. I quickly raced home, barely catching my breath. I'd never been that scared in my life. When I got inside my house, I felt a cool breeze on my pants. It was then that I realized I had pissed myself out of fear. I quickly hopped in the shower to calm myself down. I somehow went to bed and fell asleep, waking up early in the next morning in a panic, realizing I left the fire going on the mountain, along with my lawn chair and my bottle of rye. I mustered up the courage to drive back up there. However, this time I grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun with slugs that could take down a grizzly bear and decided to go back up. When I got to the spot, I opened the window to my Jeep and listened to see if I could hear anything out of the ordinary. I was pleased to have the sounds of birds in the background. I pulled up to the fire, which was smoldering, and thankfully didn't spark anything around it and get out of hand. My lawn chair was torn apart and dragged near the area where I'd seen the creature. Whatever it was stole my bottle of rye. But I guess that's okay. It wasn't me. I still had that uneasy feeling, so I quickly poured a jug of water over the fire pit, putting it fully out. I grabbed the wrecked lawn chair and threw it in my Jeep. I looked around a bit, and all over the ground were these large, canine-like prints. Dozens of them. That was enough for me not to stick around. I quickly hopped back in the driver's seat and drove down the mountain. It's been a number of years since that happened. I haven't gone back since. But after looking into this on the internet and hearing Butch Witkowski on Spaced Out Radio a number of times, I think what I saw was a dog man. I never want to see another one again. There is always high strangeness surrounding Canada's provincial parks. This one is no different coming out of Newfoundland. We thank Lon Strickler from phantomsandmonsters.com for providing this story for Canada's Great Unknown. Don't forget, if you have a strange experience or story about anything that you've experienced in Canada, please email us and let us know at canadasgreatunknown@gmail.com. This is a real experience that happened to me when I was around 10, camping with my family at Butterpot Provincial Park in Newfoundland around the mid-1980s. In Newfoundland, there is a lot of traditional folklore about fairies and being fairy-led. Example, being sort of mesmerized and stolen away by the fairies. And although I've never really believed in that stuff, whenever I hear those tales, I cannot help but think about my own personal experience. We arrived at the campground around mid-afternoon. I remember that it was strangely empty. We saw no other occupied sites as we drove around looking for the perfect spot. We picked our site, and as my parents were setting up, my older sister asked if she and I could go check out the little beach area, which was a short walk along a clearly marked downhill path through some birch woods. Our mom said yes, but told us to be back in 2 hours. We found the sign pointing us to the beach trail and headed down the path. Almost as soon as we were out of sight of the campground, things started to feel a little bit off. It was weirdly quiet, with a sort of muffled feeling. No birds calling, no breeze, just a thick, velvety silence. I also noticed that there were strange-looking ferns growing thickly around the path all around us. Ferns are not an unusual sight in the Newfoundland woods, but these were different from the ones I'd seen before. Bright, almost luminous green, and very, very large. Some were as tall as I was. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were people or animals hiding in them, watching us pass by. Although it had been a lovely, clear day, the weather started to change as we walked. A low-flying fog rolled in as we descended, first in tendrils close to the ground, then gradually rising around us as we went lower towards the water. Even living in Newfoundland, I'd never walked into a fog like that before, and it did nothing to relieve the eerie feeling that I was trying to ignore. Finally, we arrived at a steep set of wooden stairs, and following them we emerged onto a small, foggy beach. With the woods behind and above us, it felt very closed in, and I started wishing that we were safely back with our parents at the campsite. My sister made a small noise behind me, and I turned to see what had caught her attention. Although I thought we were alone, I now noticed that there was a man, several meters away, standing very still and gazing silently out over the water. My sister called out a friendly, "Hello." It was Newfoundland in the 80s. People did that sort of thing. But he didn't move or appear to hear her. After a minute or two, I started to feel nervous, so I talked my sister into heading back to our campsite. This is where things get a little bit fuzzy. I don't remember leaving the beach, but the next thing I knew, we were on a wide, unfamiliar dirt road. It seemed like no time had passed, but I was tired, and my legs and feet felt like I'd been walking for a long time. The sun was also pretty low in the sky, which was strange because I thought we'd been gone for less than an hour. I felt disoriented and had no idea where we were. I started to panic a bit, thinking, we're lost. My sister immediately went into protective older sibling mode, saying not to worry because she was pretty sure she knew the way back. We headed off down the road in the direction she suggested, and we walked about 45 minutes or so until we finally emerged at the campground not far from our campsite. It was now almost completely dark, and we ran to our trailer to find our dad there, worriedly asking where we had been. Although we thought we had been gone for less than 2 hours, my dad said we had been gone for more than 5. He said that our mom had headed to the beach to look for us while he stayed here to wait for us at the campsite. By now, full-on darkness was settling in, and our dad was worried that our mom had not returned with us. As he prepared to go out looking for her, she burst in the door, frantically saying that she had run up and down the trail multiple times and still hadn't found us. She was amazed when she saw us. The only way to access that beach, aside from cutting through steep, thick woods, was to take that trail, and we had not passed her. Once we all calmed down, we ate dinner and headed to bed. As I lay in my bunk, I remember hearing my mom quietly telling my dad how creepy and strange that trail had felt. Although we planned to stay longer, we packed up and left quickly the following morning. We have never, ever returned to that campground. My name is Mike, and I am a friend of Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio. If you're a listener, you've probably heard the condensed version of this story, because I know Dave likes to mention it on air when he's talking about really weird happenings and creatures around our area in the Caribou. I, myself, am an amateur Bigfoot hunter who's seen and experienced some strange things in the forest. As a hunter, as well, I have a pretty keen eye on my surroundings and do not take the dangers of the forest for granted. It can be a dangerous place if you're not careful, especially if you know the creatures that are lurking around. On this particular evening, I was driving the logging roads about 15 kilometers from where Dave broadcasts from SOR headquarters. This is in the lower Caribou region of British Columbia. It was a warm, late afternoon, heading towards dusk, in August, when I was cruising in the backwoods looking for grouse or rabbits that may become my next meal. The sun was going down over the horizon, but the blue sky still kept things pretty bright. Since it was starting to get late, and I was out in the woods alone, I decided that I would pull off the road and drive myself down this small hill into a gravel pit, where many hunters, such as myself, used to take in some target practice and sight in their rifles. I stopped my truck, walked to the tailgate, and pulled out my .243 Winchester from its secure case. After about 30 minutes of target shooting, I was satisfied that in case that deer or something bigger came around that I had a tag for, I would be safe and be able to take the shot if necessary. I put the gun away and pulled out my shotgun to take a couple of shots with it next. The gravel pit is a little strange because on one side it's all gravel and rocks, but if you look in the opposite direction, it's all forest. So it's a matter of 50 to 60 yards. You go from rocks to lush trees and bush. I've hunted in this spot before, many times, for grouse and rabbits. I also knew that the critters wouldn't be scared off by my shooting that I was doing, as for some reason they're either too oddball or too brave to understand the power of a gun. With my truck parked in the gravel pit, I decided I would quietly saunter over to the forest line to see if I could see any animals starting to come out. The one thing I know about grouse and rabbits is that they like to come out of hiding when the sun goes down. The chances of my hunt being successful were going to be good, as this area has produced for me before. I'm the type of hunter, just for the record, that only takes what I need. I don't like to see when the ecosystem gets abused by hunters. It drives me nuts. So I was walking slowly along the forest line to see if anything would pop out of the trees or along the forest floor. I started to slowly go up the hill that I had driven down, as I had seen grouse in that area before. I walked the 100 or so yards on the slow incline up to the top of the logging road. I then slowly turned around and made my way back down. When I got about 2/3 of the way down, one of the strangest and scariest things in my life happened to me. I still cannot explain it. All around me, I started hearing Dave's voice, and I came to a complete stop. "Help me! Help me! I'm over here!" Every hair on my body stood up, and cold shivers started going down my spine. The sound of Dave's voice was all around me, emanating from every direction. Yet I felt I was being coaxed into walking into the forest to look for him. I also knew that it was 100% Dave, the sound of the voice. I also knew that the sound of the voice was 100% Dave, but I knew he wasn't there, because at this time of night, he's at SOR HQ preparing for the show. At first, I didn't know what to do. I had this extreme feeling of danger and didn't know how to react to it. I started to have an extreme fear of dread come over me. Do I go in there? Do I not? No way, I said to myself. There's no way it could be Dave. I was about 50 yards from my truck, and I decided to be safe and take the safe bet and go back to my truck and get inside. I chambered a shell and walked swiftly, keeping my eyes on the area where the noise had come from. The voice had stopped as I started walking to my truck. I didn't want to hear it again, and thankfully I didn't. When I reached the safety of my vehicle, I jumped in and started it up. I also locked the doors. I quickly exchanged the shotgun shells for slugs, just in case something came out of that forest and wanted to say hello. I then mustered up the courage to drive over to that spot. I had no choice. That was the trail to the exit to the logging road. I opened up my driver's side window and then sat there for 10 to 15 minutes to see if anything would come out of the trees. But that feeling of dread was now gone. Things seemed to be back to normal. The whole thing still weirded me out to a point that I didn't feel like hunting that day anymore and decided to go home. Now, I have been to that gravel pit many times before and many times since. I've never experienced something like this, and I hope I never experience it again. I've talked to many people about this event. People I've talked to state that the Wendigo and skinwalkers are known for this type of calling. Our indigenous people, though, state that there are none of those creatures in this area, but the little people have been known to do this as well. Whatever it was, looking back, I do know that something was trying to lure me into the bush, and I don't know why. What I've learned from this is, if it doesn't feel right, you get the hell out of the area, fast. Trust your instincts. Trusting your instincts may be the difference between living, dying, or disappearing.